So, I've been playing a lot of XDefiant lately, like multiple hours a day of just tearing it up in public matches. And I think it finally needs to be said once and for all just how much better of an experience this game offers than any of the last 5 Call of Duty titles, and it all boils down to the matchmaking. Now, I've always been a fan of Call of Duty's fast-paced movement and map design, although a majority of the new maps in the newest 5 games were more confusing than unlocking weapons in Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 2's movement was an absolute clunky mess that left anyone with a semblance of skill disappointed and hopefully quitting the game for the sake of their mental health. Now, while I love taking a dump on Modern Warfare 2 every chance I get, I'll save that for later. The last 5 Call of Duty games have had the worst matchmaking I've ever experienced playing any game ever, and that's saying something considering I've played a lot of multiplayer shooters in my life, some of which have rigged matchmaking, from games like Titanfall, Destiny 1 and 2, to Fortnite, Call of Duty, Apex, Rainbow Six, Valorant, CSGO, Halo, Overwatch, Team Fortress, to even games like Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, and the original Perfect Dark, which came out in 2000. That's one of my favorites. I've felt and watched the matchmaking of multiplayer games evolve. I've experienced gaming when there was no skill matching, I've experienced skill-based matchmaking in ranked and unranked modes, and I felt horrendously rigged matchmaking, but nothing even comes close to the dumpster fire experience of Call of Duty's matchmaking. If one thing could ruin a great game, it's matchmaking, and Call of Duty never fails to have terrible matchmaking, and although the last 5 games haven't really been that high quality, they would have at least been tolerable at the very least. And with Black Ops 6 coming up, looking really promising from a gameplay, development, and overall quality standpoint, it makes me disappointed to know that the matchmaking is going to swoop in and ruin the experience altogether. And I'm sorry for being the bearer of bad news here, but that's the truth, and people, including huge YouTubers and content creators, are in denial for some reason, stating that Black Ops 6 is going to be fun to play. But knowing COD's matchmaking, all the new features are ultimately going to be undermined and in some cases likely unusable because of how competitive matches get for anyone with a semblance of skill and coordination. But that's okay, because we finally got a good replacement for COD that I'm fine with playing for the foreseeable future, however long that is. And that game is obviously XDefiant. I wouldn't exactly call it a huge hype train, but the game was certainly being hyped up because of its COD-like gameplay, but mainly because the personnel behind the game are ex-COD devs and COD pros, and the producer is Mark Rubin, the guy who produced some of the best COD games to date. Mark Rubin also promised the player base absolutely no matchmaking other than ping-based, and the game even allows you to pick whether or not you play with only people using your input method or on your platform. And seeing the hype here clues us in on how miserable COD's matchmaking experience actually is. XDefiant offers a unique but widely familiar experience to new players and Call of Duty veterans alike, offering diverse but reasonable movement options, a good variety of weapons, very well-designed maps, which notably have very few flaws at all, unlike most of COD's goofy maps they put out nowadays that look like they've been constructed by a toddler that just unearthed their father's 50-year-old Lego collection, all in the name of accessibility. God forbid you learn the map layout and develop your own personal strategy for how you like to play a certain map. We can't have that. We just need people to be able to camp in a safe space on their first try and go barely positive just so they don't quit and so they buy skins. Dang, every time I talk about modern COD, I just can't stop ranting. But I digress. Love it or hate it, the quality of XDefiant's design is one of rare caliber. It's a passion project that deserves every ounce of success it's gotten, and the only thing holding it back from dominating the FPS scene is Call of Duty's ever-present hype cycle, which was perfectly timed to interfere with the launch of XDefiant and disrupt the switch that players were making to it. You can say the game sucks all you want, but you would just be wrong. The game is modern COD with good movement and good maps that rewards a skilled player, and if you think the game is bad, you're probably just getting stomped by players that actually know how to play, while you've had your hand held for 5 years straight by a matchmaking algorithm that's designed to make you think you're better than you are. When I hopped into XDefiant and got the hang of it, I was top fragging and landing MVP in back-to-back matches, consistently playing well, and actually having my playstyle and strategic decisions work out for me. And this is all thanks to the lack of any kind of rigged and manipulative matchmaking. And since this game is just COD without kill streaks where you have to play the objective, there's really no excuse for being bad at this game if you think you're good at COD. Unless COD's eomm was holding your hand and you really just suck, but you never knew until you actually experienced a legitimate variety within the player base, not just the tiny percentage that COD's overbearing algorithm restricts you to. Needless to say, XDefiant's matchmaking is so good compared to COD, it's not even a close or fair comparison. It's the difference between your grandmother's chocolate chip cookies and Chips Ahoy. One is baked with care and passion and based off feedback from your supporters orders to make sure that every batch is better than the last, with every ingredient visible and pronounceable, and is also free to eat, while the other is overproduced, overpriced, cheap corporate slop with unreadable ingredients that'll probably give you heart failure in 40 years' time. XDefiant is a passion project that promises an experience that we've been starved for, with fair and fun gameplay, and Call of Duty is the corporate slop that promises the nostalgia of grandma's cookies, but then overcharges you for the new game and also throws in an undercover psyops matchmaking algorithm to addict you to the game. The difference between them is truly night and day. I can play XDefiant for hours at a time without ever getting stressed out even once. I may have an overly sweaty match where my teammates can't shoot the broadside of a barn and refuse to play the objective, but I know that in the next game, that probably isn't going to repeat itself, and so I shouldn't concern myself with one game of nonsense where it isn't even my fault to begin with. Whereas in Call of Duty, every single match is like playing a tournament final because I'm roped into a group of good players who are segregated from every other player in the game and forced to constantly play matches against them in order to protect the fragile ego of trash players who can't compete with our superior skill sets. The funniest part is that Call of Duty isn't even that much of a mechanical game. Sure, you can have sweaty no-life levels of movement ability, and you can train to be a human aimbot, but CoD is a brain game when it boils down to it. Whoever makes smarter decisions and plays the map correctly is going to win the game. It's not who can slide and jump the most, or even who can aim the best. So long story short, we're not only being segregated from players who suck at aiming and movement, we're more so being separated from players who don't actually think about the game they're playing or make any sort of calculated decisions whatsoever. And I bet those players in real life can make calculated decisions all day long with relative ease, but playing a silly video game, they just can't be bothered. The philosophy behind separating good players from mediocre players is one that is so insufferable and flawed that I can barely talk about it without going on a rant. The funniest part is that XDefiant's matchmaking proves how wrong CoD's philosophy really is. They said once that having a certain limit on skill disparity in a match makes for a healthier ecosystem, which is just the biggest load of nonsense I've ever read. Because in XDefiant, a game claimed by angry people on Twitter to be overrun by sweats and have no casuals because of the lack of skill matching, only really has one or two sweaty players on one team at one time. And even then, they're usually not really that good because once they're forced to play the objective, they become useless and can't even find the top 3 leaderboard spots in their team because they're so conditioned to just go for kills and they just die. Whereas in CoD, every match you play, if you're even remotely good, is filled with players of equal or higher skill than you, which makes for not only a consistently sweaty and stressful match, it also just makes you want to quit because you never see how you actually measure up to the rest of the player base. You're only playing against exactly what the super powerful psyops AI algorithm wants you to play against, which means you lack the basic freedom any game should offer, and that's the freedom and fairness of competition. If you have a functioning cranium and can play the objective, you should have absolutely no problem doing well in XDefiant. And in addition to that, even after a few games, you'll develop personal strategies and learn from your mistakes that you perform better than when you started. If you're getting absolutely pummeled in XDefiant, you're probably just not that good because there is no skill matching. But we haven't even talked about the worst part of Call of Duty's matchmaking, and it has to be that feeling of dread when we play a good game. Because we know the following match is going to be a nightmarish sweat fest where we're forced to play much worse than the previous game because it's not seen as fair in their communist ecosystem. Every time we play well in CoD, we always are not looking forward to the next match because that's when the eomm will knock your ego down a couple notches along with your kill-death ratio, with seemingly nothing you can do about it unless you're an absolute unit who spends the majority of their waking hours playing the game to the point where you're virtually unstoppable and your brain is merged with your computer and you've become one with it, like the Matrix. See, in CoD, matches are based on your performance in the previous one, as they've admitted by saying they measure performance. It's right here in writing, by the way. Any matchmaking algorithm that measures performance can't be trusted, because every game you play is based off the last game you just played, which means every experience is not genuine and it's tailored. It's a variable that is defined by other variables, not a random value. It's like X equals Y, but Y equals Z, and Z equals A, and A equals B. So really, the 5th match is because of the 4th one, but the 4th one's because of the 3rd one, and then that can all boil down to how you played in the first match, and that determines your entire play session. It's not real. It's fake. But in XDefiant, if you play a good game, you can just look forward to continuing your session in similar fashion because no matches are manipulated or tailored based on your past performances. This leads to longer, more relaxing, and more fun play sessions where you're constantly enjoying yourself, with maybe 1 out of 10 matches being minorly frustrating. But if you're doing your job, it's your teammates' fault, so who cares? The fact that XDefiant allows you to not worry about your next game when you play well is actually insane, because it feels like every single gamer on the face of the earth that plays multiplayer video games knows that dread of playing a good match, because you know that the calculated and computerized PsyOps modern matchmaking algorithms are going to humble you the next match you play, whether you like it or not. Every single multiplayer gamer has that feeling instilled in them that the matchmaking is going to kick in after a good game. Heck, it's gotten so bad that I've seen memes about it on Instagram Reels, and that's how you know everyone's in on it. So this all being said, I don't think I'll be pre-ordering or purchasing Black PsyOps 6 unless their matchmaking changes to XDefiant's style. And even then, it's a rough decision because of how fun and promising XDefiant is. That game only puts out good content, is balanced, and is a consistently good time. And I never have to worry about a map being terrible. And with CoD, you never know. I never have to worry about guns being overpowered, but in CoD, you never know. I never have to worry about my matches being manipulated, but in CoD, well, we do know that. With CoD devs and pros and Mark Rubin behind that game, and the sheer amount of content it'll have even in a few months, CoD is going to have a harder and harder time competing with it. But that's all I can rant about for now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you pre-ordered Black Ops 6, cancel that! I'm Prime Pete. Take it easy.